Good morning. I'm Dr. Frances Yahia, and I'd like to talk to you today about some tools that I provide for free on my website, my YouTube channel, that will help you on your journey to enlightenment. Many people think that enlightenment happens out of the body or is an experience only linked to transcendence in another realm, but actually enlightenment can only happen in the body. A lot of people say, I'm going to go find myself and become enlightened. What you are finding in finding yourself is your lower nature. Unfortunately, in this day and age, with a lot of new age spirituality, the shadow or the lower nature or our desirous nature is being touted as bad and a possibility to be eradicated. And it is not so. It is only with acceptance, full radical acceptance of your lowest nature, that you can actually seek and reach enlightenment. So in my previous video, I talked about the 3 snow globe phases to enlightenment. We talked about delusion and not necessarily knowing you're suffering, but being addicted or attached to your suffering. This is the intact snow globe. The enlightenment process is a full unraveling process, what I call shattering snow globes, because you're shattering all the delusion about what you think life is, what you think you are, and that something is actually happening to you rather than you being responsible for creating everything. This is not a shame or a blame. It is actually the most largest state of empowerment. Knowing how much agency you have for certain things and then what you don't have agency of is the most empowering process and the biggest part of the enlightenment or the spiritual journey. And lastly is putting your snow globe back together again, where you have to choose the veil. In another video, I'm going to talk about giving your thoughts room to breathe, where you identify what you really think about yourself. But despite having that thought, your thoughts are dictating all of this, that you can enhance them, that you can dress them up, that you can put a veil on and live in the world at this higher vibration with this higher consciousness and transmuted thought about yourself. So this is the Kinsingu step, if you will, where you put yourself back into the snow globe, but you decorate it. It has room to breathe, and you can live with the belief and the realization of your lowest nature, your animal consciousness, that delusional state that we're all in, but yet with that awareness and acceptance, you choose to make a pretty awesome life. So some of the tools that I have that are available for the first step is something I call the TED Talk. In my first book, The 7 Gates Beyond Self-Awareness, on my website, dryahia.com, there is a free version of the workbook. It's a modified version from the actual text, but the steps are there. There's 7 steps to self-awareness. The first 3 steps are the most important. You have to identify your thought. When you have a thought or a conflict, something that shows up in your life, that thought was given to you, the belief was given to you by your mother or your father. So you want to identify whose thought is it? Is this a mom thought or a dad thought? You know, work really hard, because if not, you're going to be on the street, for instance. Any thought that comes up that's negative, and thoughts are negative, okay? We cannot eradicate this. Comes from either learned mom or dad. So first identifying that this is your roots of your tree that can never be eradicated. Then you want to know the judgment. What is the impure thought, desire, or judgment that you have around it? What don't I like about the thought, the person, the place, the situation that is creating the conflict? That tells you about your lowest nature, the deadly sin, the vice or passion that you have that you judge. And then if you want to go to that next step, it's what emotion do you attach to that thought? We'll talk about emotions later. Really, right now, this is about thoughts. Truth of thought is the first step towards enlightenment. You do not know what you're thinking, you will never be able to give that thought room to breathe. Okay, so that creates suffering. That thought, attachment to the thought, the belief that you have to have something, the belief that you have to be a certain way, the belief that you have to know something, the belief that you can't be abandoned or rejected, the belief that you're not worthy. Those thoughts that create perpetual problems are created by us to maintain us tribal thinking, pride, love and belonging to our family, our roots, our ancestors, a group. It makes us feel like we are part of something. When you start identifying through this TED Talk, and there's tons of resources on my YouTube and my website about the particular process, you start to realizing you've created the suffering, you're attached to this thought because it serves you, it makes you feel part of something. And that realization, when you finally start to have the ownership that, oh, I call this the psychological orgasm, this thought process, this thought that I am attached to is created by me, and it is a suffering that I'm choosing to have, then you can move into the rest of the enlightenment process. That's when we go into what's called the spiritual striptease. The spiritual striptease is basically identifying that you have all 7 of the deadly sins. They're also known as thieves, passions, vices, shadribus. Every philosophy has them. Greed, gluttony, pride, deceit, attachment, lust, envy. They've been sloth, wrath. They've been called many different names. And you can find these charts on my website, on videos, or you can Google a list of the sins or Aristotle's vices. They're all over the place. When you start identifying and your spiritual journey starts to show you how you run the gamut of all of these qualities, that's your spiritual striptease. I talk about this in the 7 gates, linked to a myth of Inanna, who gets pulled all her clothing as she goes into the underworld. That's why this is an ego death or an unraveling. Or so many people go through a despair or grief cycle attached to this because you're mourning the life that you've been living that has been rooted in a lie over here, choosing suffering but unaware of it. And now you're mourning that unlived life and questioning, who am I? What's my identity? And will I ever be whole again? The answer is you will be. Over here, you'll put yourself back together like Humpty Dumpty. In this process, identifying a value system is supremely important because this is going to be what keeps you solid, anchored, and grounded when you get out of this state. And I'll talk in another video more about the yes and, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So you want to pick your top 2 values that are not family. You will see I have several videos on my YouTube about value systems, and I've got rule books and workbooks throughout my website to help you with this. 2 top values, and they cannot be family. You want to know who it is that you want to be despite being a person that's greedy, that's gluttonous, that's deceitful, that's lustful, that's wrathful, etc. So that's going to be how we integrate this new snow globe. So now you're going to start rebuilding yourself on this new realization that you create suffering, that you have limiting thoughts, that you have a lower nature rooted, that you inherited from your parents, but it's what you've used to belong to a tribe or ancestry or friends or family or community, and that has served you, but now you're going to give that space room to breathe. You're now going to reintegrate into the world, owning your lower nature and your higher nature. And you're going to do what I call choose your veil. You can say, okay, I'm going to own this veil and I'm going to live in the world as this identity. You might change your job, you might change your relationship, you might change your whole wardrobe because you want to assume the new limiting thought. This is super important. Here you start off with a limiting thought. I am not worthy, I am rejected. I'll have a whole video on those thoughts. But you're unaware that they dictate everything. Here you dismantle the thoughts and you really own them. And here you put yourself back together again, recognize you need a new snow globe, a new shell, a new veil, a new limiting thought. I call this the yes and. Yes and is a concept from improv. One actor says to the other, would you like to come with me to a show? Yes and the other actor adds on a new funny or a new comedic stance to the skit. We have to do this to our same thing, to our thoughts. You cannot eradicate limiting thoughts. That is a lie. You thinking you're unworthy, you thinking you're rejected, you thinking that you're less than will never go away. That is the yes. And has to do with your value systems. Yes, I feel low self-worth, and in these situations, I will behave this way. That's where your value system, your high consciousness, your higher vibration helps to transmute the thought, not eradicate it. You cannot eliminate it, not eradicate the roots of that. Never, ever, ever will the feeling of not being identity worthy, rejected, abandoned, loved will go away, ever. It's a yes and. And you build your new life, your enlightened self, with the concept that, yes, I have this thought, this lower nature that dictates, but I'm not going to choose to believe it. I'm going to put stipulations, value systems around it, so I know how to show up in the world and behave based on my modified new belief. And that's why your life changes. We'll be more on that in another video. Thank you.